It is 7 o'clock, which means you're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. Boris Johnson could find that some of his own backbenchers might be unwilling to raise a glass to extending coronavirus laws. Expect some heated debate, but no barroom brawls when it's voted on in the Commons later today. Plus, the first steps to a better start in life for babies and children in England. Plenty to talk about with the Children's Minister, Vicky Ford, in just a few minutes' time. But also this morning, a face I'm sure many of you will recognise, the former Love Island star Zara McDermott will be talking to us about her experience with revenge porn, as new research shows that victims have doubled in the last 2 years. She's on the show at 9:15. We also have this. From twisting my melon man to saddling up, the Happy Monday star Bez will be telling us about the launch of his own racing club, despite, by his own admission, knowing absolutely nothing about horses. That's at 9:45 on this Thursday, the 25th of March. At loggerheads over lockdown, Boris Johnson faces a possible backbench rebellion as MPs vote on extending coronavirus legislation. Raising the bar, bitter criticism over a suggestion that vaccine certificates might be needed to have a pint in the pub. Injecting some clarity, EU leaders will hold talks to find ways to boost vaccine supplies as a third COVID wave sweeps across the continent. They deserve more than just applause. Nicola Sturgeon says all NHS staff in Scotland will receive a pay rise of at least 4%. Through the storm, a Sky News special report inside the wards during the height of the COVID second wave. A beacon of hope, the Olympic torch begins its 4-month relay to Tokyo ahead of this summer's delayed games.
And it stays unsettled for the rest of the week with wet and windy weather at times and some wintry outbreaks expected tomorrow where we have a brief cold spell. I'll have the details for you later.
Morning all. Boris Johnson could face a possible backbench rebellion today, with the Commons set to vote on the renewal of emergency powers granted by the Coronavirus Act. Even though Labour is supporting the government, dozens of Tory MPs are threatening to rebel, arguing that there's no need to extend the legislation. The PM, for his part, is facing increasing criticism over his suggestion that pub landlords may be given the powers to bar anyone who hasn't had a COVID jag. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has our first report.
In Bristol, a city that's seen violent protests this week, lockdown means going to the park is about the only option for people who want to get out. And today, MPs are voting on extending the emergency coronavirus legislation for 6 months and current lockdown restrictions into July. Here, some accept the need for lockdown measures, but others say they should end now that more people are being vaccinated.
Personally, I'd like to see them keep the powers but use them more flexibly, because we don't know that this is the end of the pandemic.
I think any kind of unlimited power is quite a scary thing, and I think it should always be a temporary measure. I think something that was brought in for an emergency measure should never just become the norm.
Most of the population's got their vaccine now. That's what they said that they needed to do for everything to be open. So why are we still in lockdown?
Today's Commons votes come after Boris Johnson told MPs that when lockdown measures are eased, drinkers may need a COVID vaccine to go to the pub.
I do think that the basic concept of vaccine certification should not be totally alien to us.
You mentioned surgeons and the care sector. That's very different to the ordinary citizen going to the pub. So do you recognise that distinction for COVID vaccine certification?
I think that that's the kind of thing that, it may be up to individual publicans.
Pub landlords claim the plan is unworkable and would cause conflict between bar staff and customers.
We've had to jump through hoops, everything we've had to do to be COVID secure, more maybe than any other industry that I know of. And to suddenly plant this on top of us, I think is an injustice for us.
Though Labour is backing the government, dozens of Conservative MPs are threatening to rebel, claiming the 6-month extension of the emergency legislation is unnecessary.
There's a whole bunch of really quite draconian measures that were emergency measures that have been in place during the pandemic. And the government wants to extend them till October, 3 months past that June deadline, and I haven't heard a single good reason for doing so.
In Bristol, some scars of the protests remain. And lockdown measures are set to remain too. John Craig, Sky News.
Hoping to speak to the Children's Minister in just a couple of moments, but let's bring in Joe Pike. Good to see you this morning, Joe. Look, we've talked a little bit already in John's piece and in the introduction about a rebellion this afternoon. The government will win the vote, but the size of the rebellion might be actually quite substantial.
Yeah, and there are Conservative backbenchers who are very frustrated. They think because of the rollout of the vaccine is going so successfully, do we really need all these restrictions in place? And actually today, I suppose, is an opportunity, a platform for them to air their views, air their grievances, put their opposition to the government. But as you say, I think it's very likely this legislation will pass and it will give government powers until September, even though they will not necessarily use them to extend the roadmap beyond June.
Joe, thanks very much indeed. Well, when EU leaders meet virtually later, the issue of vaccine rollout will, of course, be top of the agenda. With cases rising across Europe and several countries imposing new lockdowns, the European Commission has called for tougher controls on exports of COVID vaccines. The aim being to stop supplies leaving the bloc and heading for countries like the UK, where the rollout is far more advanced. Our Europe correspondent Michelle Clifford reports.
The evidence of why more vaccines are desperately needed in the EU is there in every nation. In Belgium, hospitals struggled under the pressure of a third wave of COVID, the government announcing new restrictions to try and bring things under control. In France's capital, doctors warn the next month will be hell, even after a new lockdown was imposed in some regions. It's against that backdrop that the European Commission is pushing for tighter controls on vaccine exports, saying there had to be fairness, reciprocity between nations, and citing an unequal relationship with the UK.
Some 10 million doses had been exported from from EU to UK, and 0 doses had been exported from UK to EU.
The UK and EU have promised to work together, but could fall out over the EU's new focus on looking at other countries' vaccination rates when considering exports. The UK is doing well, but here on the continent, only around 10% of the population have received jabs. Spain has resumed the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine after pausing because of worries over blood clots.
AstraZeneca's failure to deliver tens of millions of vaccines to the EU infuriated the Commission and partly explains the move to toughen up export rules. But many warn the EU is playing a dangerous game because Europe relies on imports of components and ingredients from all over the world to make its vaccines. This UK factory, for example, produces components for the Pfizer-BioNTech factories in the EU. Pfizer said the free movement of goods and supply are critical, a sentiment echoed by Boris Johnson.
I don't think that blockades of either vaccines or of medicines, of ingredients for vaccines are sensible.
The EU rejects any notion of blockades on its part, but will fear any counter-reaction as more countries face a third wave of COVID. And when EU leaders meet virtually today, they will have to weigh up the risks and benefits of any tightening of export rules. Michelle Clifford, Sky News, Brussels.
Well, let's head back to Brussels. Sky's Alistair Bunko there for us this morning. Morning, Alistair. Just explain the chronology of events today. What exactly is going to happen when, and when won't we actually get an outcome to all of this?
Well, that last bit of your question, I'm not sure. In terms of when things will start, though, midday your time, 1 o'clock over here. As Michelle said towards the end of her report, it will be virtual because of coronavirus. And very much at the top of the list will be the vaccine rollout. And I think the EU Commission is fighting battles on a number of fronts. Of course, very publicly, there is that row with the UK as to exports from EU territory to other countries, and primarily the UK because the UK rollout is so much more advanced and because AstraZeneca is a British-Swedish company as well. But also there is an internal squabble because a lot of countries don't believe that putting up any barriers is the right way forward, so it's not a universally held position. But there are disagreements as well as to who within the EU should receive vaccines first and in greatest numbers. The Austrians, for example, believe that they are part of the disadvantaged group, and yet most of Europe think actually Austria, at least proportionally, has been one of the better countries to roll out its vaccine. So it's an almighty mess, both internally and externally. They need to get together and work out exactly what to do and sort it out pretty quickly, because again, as Michelle was saying in her piece, time is really urgent. Many countries in the EU, including the one I'm in right now, are going into new lockdowns. Cases are rising. And the fact is, these leaders who are gathering today have their own populations pointing the finger at them, saying, what are you doing about it? You're not doing enough.
Indeed. Alistair, many thanks. Still to come on the show, we are still hoping to speak to the Children's Minister, Vicky Ford, in just a few moments. Plus, now I don't often put my hands in my pockets, but this morning, a little bit different, as we will be discussing this, the new 50 quid note. We'll be joined with the Chief Cashier at the Bank of England at 7:45. Bet you can't guess who's on the reverse. We'll be hearing from the Shadow Business Secretary, Ed Miliband, on why he thinks we need an electric vehicle revolution just after 8 o'clock. At 8:20, we'll be speaking to one of the Conservative backbench MPs critical of the emergency powers granted by the Coronavirus Act. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news this morning. And Japan says that North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles off the east coast and into the sea. The Japanese Prime Minister says the launches threaten peace and safety in Japan and the region, and that Tokyo would closely coordinate with Washington and Seoul about the North's testing activities. North Korea's ballistic missiles are banned under the United Nations Security Council resolutions.
It is a threat to our country and to the regional security. It is also a violation of the United Nations Security Council resolution. We will strictly protest and condemn their action. I am determined to closely cooperate with the United States, South Korea, and other related nations to protect the lives and peaceful lives of our people.
People over 50 and those at risk are being urged to book their COVID-19 vaccines quickly before slots dry up. The National Medical Director for the NHS, Stephen Powis, says that anyone who qualifies for a jab but hasn't had one yet should book an appointment in the next few days. Doctors are calling on the government to tackle social inequality in the UK as a matter of moral and economic urgency. The British Medical Association says that ministers must prioritise making the universal credit uplift permanent and investing in mental health and child support services as lockdown restrictions are eased in the coming months. A group of peers are warning of substantial barriers still in place for UK trade with Europe post-Brexit. A Lords subcommittee says that small firms have been feeling the impact since the start of the free trade deal with Brussels in January. And I am very pleased to say that we've managed to secure the Children's Minister, Vicky Ford, joining us on the programme. Ms Ford, good to see you this morning. A very busy day ahead for you. A very busy day ahead for you, I'm afraid. The early years review. Tell us just a little bit about it. Andrea Leadsom has been working on this for the government.
Yes, so this has been a really important and a timely review that's looking at those very, very first stages in a child's life, actually from the moment that the pregnancy starts right through to the first 2 years of a child's life. And we know that those early years are the key stages of a child's development, and that the years that a child spends before they start school are actually so important to set them up for life. So Andrea Leadsom and a group of others have been looking at how we can improve support and services and actually signposting to support and services for families of very young children.
Yeah, the signposting aspect of all of this, I'm sure, will be warmly welcomed. The idea that there'll be a one-stop shop where you can find everything that you need to know in those early years. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so one of the recommendations is that in each local area, they should produce their own sort of start for life strategy, which sets out for parents and carers where they can go and find local support and local services in their area, in their own area. And then one of the things that I've been doing as Children's Minister and that we've been doing as government is also championing the family hub approach, which is where, again, a family can go through a single front door, be that a virtual front door on the internet or a real one, such as I have in my own constituency, and find signposts to all sorts of different services, public services, but also voluntary organisations that are arranging different groups support for families. And that is not only for the early years, but throughout the child's life as well.
I have to say, Minister, there's been a generally positive response from the social media that I have seen this morning, but plenty of people also pointing out that the necessity for these changes is a direct consequence of the Conservative government's actions on Sure Start centres. 1,300 family centres were closed down by this government in 10 years, and you're now starting to build back up from that point.
Well, actually, no, over the past decade, there's actually been a remarkable improvement in the outcomes of really young children. So we do what I call a 5-year-old test, which is each child as they start reception, we look at whether or not they're at a good state of readiness for school. And back 8 years ago, it was only 1 in 2 children who were meeting that level. It's now 3 out of 4. So it's obviously up to local areas how they bring together those different services. But the family hub model, which I have in my constituency and there is in other areas, is a very successful way of signposting people to different resources. So we've put massive investment into early years education, which is partly why we have much better outcomes for our young children than we did in the past.
Certainly, this early years review and the action contained in it does rest, of course, on there being money available. And it does feel sometimes at the moment that whilst there's lots and lots of money for certain things, there's not very much money for others. This morning we hear that north of the border, the First Minister in Scotland is awarding NHS Scotland staff, healthcare professionals, a 4% pay rise across the board. Down here, nurses are looking at 1%. Why are they able to do it and the UK government is not?
So when it comes to early years support, sometimes it's not just about the funding, but it's actually being able to find out what is available in your own local area. Where is there a breastfeeding support class? What advice?
But why is the First Minister able to offer NHS staff 4% whilst the British government is offering 1%?
In terms of course, the staff pay for the NHS workers. And of course, I'm married to an NHS doctor myself. I know how hard our NHS workers have been working during this pandemic. We do want to make sure that even at this very challenging time for the whole economy, that there is a pay rise for the NHS staff. That's been fed in, that suggestion has been fed into the independent review that happens every year.
I understand that it's not your brief, but the question is, why are they able to offer 4% and we're offering 1%?
In terms of nurses' pay, of course, we've been focusing over the past few years on making sure that those on lowest pay do get an increase. So, for example, the salary for a new nurse, a starting nurse, has gone up by over 12% in recent years. So they have different devolved powers in Scotland, but obviously we will be looking, and the Prime Minister is looking, and the Health Secretary is looking at the situation in England, and that's where the strategy has been really focusing on making sure the support goes to those on the lowest incomes as well. And this will feed into the independent review to which the government's made its recommendations.
Minister, I wonder though, you will of course be speaking to your colleagues in the Conservative Party day in, day out, and of course there's a key vote this afternoon on the extension of coronavirus restrictions. I understand, given your position as a minister, the way that you will be voting on all of this, but do you understand some of the concerns that are being expressed by, amongst others, Mark Harper?
So I think, everybody wants to get out of this lockdown and back to normality as quickly as possible. But we also want to not have to go back into these measures again. And we want the way out of lockdown to be irreversible. That's why we've set up the roadmap. We have the most amazing vaccine programme of any country of our size anywhere, which is really helping us out of this. The roadmap has set those very clear measures in order to get back to normality. And I think that we should be following that. I think that's the way to give people that certainty. We need to look at the data at each stage as we come out of the roadmap, but we cannot be in a situation where we take a step too fast and then have to go back again.
Mm-hmm. But the concerns are not necessarily just limited to the timetable, of course, although there are grave concerns amongst people like Mark Harper, who I've just mentioned, but also in terms of some of the measures that are being proposed. I mean, we heard the Prime Minister not that long ago suggesting that you would not need to be vaccinated to go into a pub. Now we discover that he is going to give landlords, publicans, the opportunity to insist either on a negative test or on a vaccination before people can go into a pub. I mean, it's a U-turn. It's certainly a U-turn, but I'm just trying to understand the rationale behind it.
When we set up the roadmap way back in February to show us the way out of this lockdown, one of the things that we said in the roadmap was that there would be reviews of different situations, and there was always in that roadmap a review of the certifications and use of testings, and that review, which would look at how you use vaccines, how you use testings to keep settings safe as we go to that widest reopening, that is due before the fourth stage of the lockdown. So it's always been very clear that we would be looking at a review of all the different measures you could do in order to take that really widest step.
Minister, I'm going to let you go off and get yourself a glass of water. Get that.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheerio.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Now, as we were just discussing, in fact, with the Minister, the Scottish Government is offering NHS staff a pay rise of at least 4%. The Health Secretary, Jean Freeman, said the move was in recognition of their service and dedication during the coronavirus pandemic. Well, let's speak now to Sky's Sadia Chowdhury, who's in the newsroom this morning. Good to see you, Sadia. It is an interesting move, and contained in the comments from the First Minister around it, you know, some fairly pointed criticism of what's happening in Westminster.
Yes, and actually for her, it is a really good time to be making an announcement like this, isn't it? Because pay increases for NHS workers is considered a very popular subject, especially after the year that they've had. Let me read out to you Nicola Sturgeon's tweet that she put out last night, in which she wrote, "Our NHS staff deserve more than applause, and 1% is not enough." Well, let's go through some of the details of that offer. Nurses, paramedics, porters and other support staff are included in the pay deal, but doctors are among those who aren't. Anyone working earning less than £25,000 a year will be offered at least a 4% pay rise, which means a guaranteed minimum increase of £1,000. The Scottish Government says that's likely to amount to an average increase of £1,200 a year for frontline nurses. And for the lowest paid staff, they will be offered a 5.4% pay increase. Well, the Scottish Government says that if this deal is accepted, then it will be the most generous NHS pay uplift in all of the United Kingdom. It's going to apply to 154,000 NHS Scotland staff, and it comes after that £500 one-off payment, if you remember, that they were given as a thank you for their work during the pandemic. It also is going to be backdated to December 2020, which gives them that extra bit of benefit. Now, there's already talk that this is going to shame the Westminster Government into following the Scottish example. Those were the words of one trade union today. And as you've heard, Rishi Sunak's 1% pay increase proposal for NHS England workers was considered quite unpopular. I think around 72% of the British public who were surveyed at the time of that announcement said that that was not enough. But the UK government says that that is all that is affordable at this difficult time.
Sadia, thank you. Now, time for a few other bits of news that are kicking around this morning. Some interesting stories, and this is one we'll be touching on a little bit later with one of our guests, in fact. The number of victims of revenge pornography has doubled in the last 2 years, according to new research. 15% of people surveyed said they had seen a sexual image shared without their consent, compared to 8% just 2 years ago. There's a warning that adult social care is being blocked by the government's inability to come up with a long-term plan. A report from the National Audit Office says the current system of care is ineffective and needs improvement. It's calling on the Department of Health and Social Care to work with the government to make this a reality. It's been claimed that bowel and breast cancer may be more preventable than initially thought. A study by the World Cancer Research Fund says that thousands of cancer cases could be avoided each year through diet changes and exercise. The Olympic torch relay has started, kicking off a 4-month countdown to the Summer Games in Tokyo. It began in Fukushima Prefecture and will see around 10,000 runners take the torch across Japan. The first section will not have spectators to avoid large crowds, and roadside onlookers elsewhere will have to wear masks and be socially distanced. Let's turn our attention to the weather this Thursday morning. Naz is at the wall with the details. How are we looking as we head towards the weekend, Naz?
Oh, it is looking rather unsettled. In fact, tomorrow we've got a brief cold spell where we're likely to see some wintry showers across parts of the north. Today, rain showers are more likely. Some of them will be heavy and thundery, though.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So for the rest of this week, we're going to see wet and windy weather at times still. And a brief cold spell is likely tomorrow, where we are likely to see some fairly widespread wintry showers across parts of the north, even down towards some low levels there. Until then, we are seeing rain showers this morning across parts of Ireland, Northern Ireland, the northwest of Scotland, some of them perhaps turning wintry over the high ground of Scotland first thing. And across England and Wales, it's quite cloudy with some showers scattered across central and southwestern areas that will be clearing into this afternoon. In fact, for Wales and parts of the West Midlands and for much of Northern England for most of the day, it will be mainly dry and bright, but there will be scattered showers across southern and eastern parts of England, some central areas through this afternoon, and the showers will become widespread, some heavy and thundery for Ireland, Northern Ireland and Scotland.
European leaders will meet virtually today to discuss proposals aimed at tightening vaccine exports to countries which are faring better than them in the jab rollout. It comes amidst weeks of tension between the bloc and the UK. A joint statement says that both sides are seeking a win-win situation. But Boris Johnson has warned that a blockade on vaccines would cause long-term damage. We're joined now on the programme by the French MP, Véronique Trillet-Lenoir, who's a member of the European Parliament's Committee on Public Health, also an oncologist herself. Great to have you on the programme, Doctor. What is the position of the European Union? I understand that its leadership don't want to use the phrase export ban, but ultimately, if the vaccines slow down coming across the channel, that is what it is.
It is not export ban because it is a transparent mechanism to make sure that the doses produced in Europe reach their adequate destination to fulfill the volumes expected from the contracts. We are not in a vaccine war, and I really welcome the joint statement where the UK and EU want to join their forces and will probably have to put some kind of pressure on the firms, especially on AstraZeneca, because this firm does not apply the rules towards EU. It's doing a kind of unfair distribution of the vaccines. So again, we are not trying to block exportations in a systematic way. We intend to verify that the firm is following its commitments in terms of where does the products done in EU.
Apologies for interrupting, but if AstraZeneca is not fulfilling its contractual obligations, if it's not fulfilling the obligations under the contract that it signed with the European Union, then surely the thing that the European Union needs to do is take them to court.
Well, as you may be aware of, there has been a dispute. There is a dispute ongoing. So the juridical part of it is ongoing. The EU is aiming to kind of juridically attack the firm, but the EU thinks, and I have the feeling that it is the same on the Prime Minister, your Prime Minister part, the EU feels that negotiations and discussions are the way to go between states. We do not have to be at the mercy of the firms. We have to work together, keeping in mind that it is difficult because all governments want to vaccinate their own populations.
You can understand, however, I'm sure, though, given the frustrations that are felt on the side of the channel that you are on about the pace of vaccination across the continent of Europe. You can understand the frustrations on this side of the channel, that it appears, from the perspective of many, many people in the United Kingdom, that we're being punished for doing rather better than the European Union.
I understand, and I do not think that nobody in Britain is punished. I'm very happy that vaccination is going on well in your country. But I think that will agree with me that facing a pandemic, if everybody is not vaccinated, no one is. And the UK will be very much isolated if other countries, European countries and other countries, including low-income countries, are not protected. So our duty as politicians is really to make sure that the pandemic is faced at a worldwide level. I have a concern for the Britain citizens. They have to receive the second dose, and your Prime Minister has to discuss with the firm and the European Union to make sure that this will be possible. You have been vaccinating very quickly in an emergency, which I understand, but from a medical and scientific point of view, we all have to do according to science-based rules and demonstrations.
Doctor, I'm afraid we do have to leave it there, but really appreciate your time on the programme this morning. Dr. Véronique Triel-Lenoir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring in, we'll stay with that story and get another European perspective on it. We're joined by the former Prime Minister of Finland, Alexander Stubb. Mr. Stubb, great to have you in the programme this morning. What do you make of this row that is apparently going on at the moment? How much of what we are seeing from the EU leadership is about the slow pace of the vaccination rollout on the continent, and how much to do with perceived failures on the part of AstraZeneca?
I think probably a lot of the both. And what I always try to do is to put myself in the shoes of the current leaders. It's quite easy to do here from Florence in the academic world. And I think what they're thinking at the moment is, okay, how can we solve the health crisis? I think the big picture is very simple. By the end of June, if the figures are right, all of Europe, or 70% of Europe, will be vaccinated. 70% of the population in the UK will be vaccinated. That's absolutely fine. And they try to look at it from a scientific perspective, all kinds of different directions. And they draw the conclusion that, listen, procurement was not a problem, but production has been. Then they start looking at who is at fault here. And I think they're looking at AstraZeneca, because if you look at the facts in the UK, and I see the numbers rolling on your screen there, you've got about 54% of the population vaccinated. In Europe, roughly 70%. If AstraZeneca had kept to their promise, Europe would have been vaccinated to about 36% at the moment, according to the Financial Times estimate. So, they're looking at things from a different perspective, production and procurement.
What do you think, then, is the likeliest outcome of this virtual summit taking place today? We understand that from both sides that they want to see, well, they're certainly expressing a desire to see a positive, mutually beneficial outcome to all of this, but someone's going to have to lose out.
Yeah, well, no, I don't see this as a zero-sum game. When we're talking about vaccination, when we're talking about a pandemic, we're all in the same boat.
Prime Minister of a country of 65 million people. A Prime Minister of a country of 65 million people might see it as a zero-sum game, given that his priority is to ensure the safety of his citizens.
Yes, but I think that your question was about what the European Union summit wants. So the way in which the prime ministers are looking at things is from two perspectives. One is internal and at home. they are, of course, dealing with a high-pressure situation, with the pandemic, with the lockdowns, with Easter coming up. And they have to show to their public that they're doing well. The other one is, of course, for instance, the British case. So that's the export, the outside thing. You have to think about it as the EU being sort of the pharmacy of the world at the moment, because it is the one that has the capacity to produce the most. So, for instance, now the EU has exported over 40 million doses. Over 10 million of those have gone to the United Kingdom. So the European Union wants to continue this type of a discussion with the rest of the world and not be caught out. You know, it's not going to be a perfect solution coming out of a summit, but I think it's going to be good. And if I may, I think at the end of the day, when the dust has settled, when Judgment Day comes, there's three things that all heads of state and government have to look at. Number one, what was the death toll? It's a morbid toll, but you have to look at it per capita and otherwise. How did the government succeed in managing? Number two, how did the vaccine rollout work out? And as I said, I think 70% of Europeans will be vaccinated by the end of June. And number three, how do you get the economy going again? And this is what the heads of state and government are grappling with at the moment. Not an easy task, may I add.
This is perhaps the first major point of disagreement. I mean, there are plenty of points of disagreement between the UK and the European Union ongoing at the moment, fishing plenty of others. But in terms of a major fallout in the post-Brexit era, this is perhaps the biggest one. What does it say, in your mind, about the prospects for a close relationship between the UK and European Union moving forward?
Well, you know that my heart is with the United Kingdom, not only through marriage and otherwise. So I do hope that the relationship will settle down and calm down. Having said that, you know, if I look at it, and sorry for being a little bit blunt, from a British, say, Johnsonian perspective, I sort of understand what the government is trying to do, because with all due respect, the United Kingdom has, after all, had one of the biggest death tolls, real and per capita, in the world. So what the government needs to do now is to show that it can manage the aftermath of the pandemic better, and therefore the vaccine numbers become a very big issue in the whole narrative. I, however, believe that I think we need to respect all of the casualties, and we need to tone down the discussion and the debate. We are in this together, and I hope that we'll iron out a better relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union in the future as well. Tit for tat simply doesn't work.
Alexander Stubb, great to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks very much for being with us. Now, you may well have seen our special reports from inside the ICU ward at the Royal Free and Barnet hospitals during the winter wave of COVID-19. Some of those interviewed didn't survive. Others face a long road to recovery. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, looks at the long-term damage the pandemic has done to the NHS and investigates whether it can ever fully recover.
The Royal Free and its sister hospital Barnet have treated around 6,000 COVID patients so far during the pandemic. More than 1,000 have died. Sky News has documented some of those life and death battles and the impact on patients, their families and staff.
Hey Dad, I know you can hear us. We can see your eyes opening.
For those who've experienced and survived the worst of this virus, only now are they beginning to process what they've been through.
I went to bed on Christmas Eve. I was fine as far as I was concerned. I got up the next day. My partner said to his friends that she won't get up, she's coughing, and I have no memory whatsoever.
The hospital phoned me up. I said, well, what chance we got? That night or in the morning, don't hold out much hope. That's what they actually said to me.
The Christmas period was frightening too for hospital staff.
I remember I'd been with my family in the daytime. I came in Christmas night and it seemed like this tsunami of people came in Christmas night. And it was the first time ever that I've come into work feeling like I can't breathe.
But nurses like Michelle stepped up. 500 staff members at the hospital adapted their roles to support intensive care specialists who were stretched to the limit.
You know, it sounds awful at times. We were doing our very best, but at times you don't even know the name of your patient by the end. You might be writing it down all day long and going through everything, but Like I say, it felt like the care part went, like... And I feel ashamed to say it was like we were managing bodies. We were trying to keep bodies alive.
But hundreds of lives, like Perry's, were saved.
When I woke up, I was very, very delirious. I was imagining all sorts of peculiar things. I thought my parents were still alive, but my mum died in '86.
After more than a month of intensive care, Perry was still on a long road to recovery.
When was that?
It's September. That was my birthday.
What are the main issues for you now?
I'm totally immobile. It's left me unable to walk. All my muscles are so weak, and it's even hard for me to send a text.
Ready, steady, go.
And COVID patients require so much help, often for many weeks, that this outbreak has inevitably impacted other hospital services. For example, since the pandemic across the NHS, the number of people waiting for more than a year for a routine operation has risen from 1,600 to more than 300,000.
We have to work our way through the operations that have not been done that needed to be done. And then after that, of course, there's the very real impact of as the scans start, and the conditions that haven't been detected really over the past 12 months, they will come to need management as well.
If I could magically stop coronavirus now, how long would it take you to get back to normal?
I don't think we'll ever get back to normal. I can't see how we're going to return to the Royal Free ITU as it was at the end of 2019. I think that's now history.
We often describe our medics as heroes, but behind the mask, they're also human.
I think everyone's a bit broken. I've been in nursing for 20 years. This is like another level. Like flashbacks through the night, or a sound will trigger something. Yeah, I'm not very good at the moment. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Patients are grateful. 12 weeks after going into hospital, Perry's home.
I was very depressed when you saw me in the hospital, but I'm feeling so much more positive. And, I'm able to walk on the Zimmer frame.
Even if the crisis passes, COVID has left a legacy. A long road to recovery for patients and the NHS. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Yeah, there was some truly remarkable work, in fact, by Jason visiting those hospitals. And his full hour-long documentary is broadcast on Sky Documentaries channel at 9 p.m. this evening and at 9 p.m. tomorrow night here on Sky News. The bosses clearly trust me this morning. A new polymer £50 note is being unveiled this morning. It features, of course, Her Majesty. She tends to put her face on most of these things these days. But on the other side, the scientist, the father of modern computing, in fact, I would say, Alan Turing, is on the reverse. Now, it's going to be issued for the first time on his birthday, the 23rd of June. Pleased to say that the Bank of England's chief cashier, Sarah John, joins us on the programme. Sarah, absolutely fantastic, this note that I'm holding in my hand here. You must be pretty proud of this.
We're really proud of this note for so many reasons. It's one of our most secure banknotes yet with the move to polymer. It's got great new security features on it. And as you say, it features Alan Turing, who is a fantastic character to reflect all his different achievements on the back of the banknote. I'm really pleased with this note.
Before we move on to kind of asking about Alan Turing and indeed the design on the note, I have to say, of course, as chief cashier of the Bank of England, the nice thing is we all get to see your signature on every one of these notes that's being released. How does that feel, knowing that your name will be in circulation on so many bits of pretty expensive paper?
It's such a privilege to be chief cashier and to sign the nation's banknotes. I'm really, really proud of it. And it's quite daunting when you choose the signature that's going to go on these banknotes. But it's a really important promise that the Bank of England is making and that I'm signing up to. They've promised to pay, which is really what gives that piece of polymer its value and its worth. So it's a real privilege, and it's a very important thing to do as well.
Tell us then, Sarah, about the decision-making process that led up to, as I say, Alan Turing, a figure who should have been far more greatly revered in his own time than he even is now. But why was he chosen as the perfect person to put on the back of the 50 quid note?
Well, the character selection process started way back actually in 2018. And we asked the public to think science and nominate scientists they wanted to go on the back of the £50 note. And we had over 225,000 individual nominations from the British public. Absolutely amazing response. Lots of them for Alan Turing. But actually, he was one of 989 individual scientists who were nominated. And we had our banknote character advisory committee, of which I'm a member, but also involves 7 expert external members to the bank as well. We had to go through biographies for all 989 scientists to whittle it down to a short list of 12, which was taken to Governor Carney, who eventually chose Turing. And I mean, he's such a great choice. He is probably best known for his code-breaking work at Bletchley Park during World War II, which has been attributed with shortening the Second World War and saving millions of lives. But beyond that, he's known as the father of computer science. He envisaged the basics of what we've now come to know as a modern computer and the impact that's had on our everyday lives. So his legacy is absolutely enormous. I mean, I'm speaking to you over a computer now, and that came from Turing's original concept and original idea. Absolutely amazing legacy.
Do you know what, Sarah? I have to admit, I was being a bit cheeky there, but the design of the note is absolutely remarkable, particularly that little bit of circuit board. I think we're going to get the camera on in a second, just in the clear panel. We're just about to run out of time, and obviously security, you can't go into specifics, but roughly how many security features do we have on this £50 note?
Too many for me to go through. Lots and lots of different levels of security. But actually, there are 2 very simple things that everyone can check on a banknote to see if it's genuine. The first one, if you turn it over, you can see there's a hologram at the bottom that flips when you turn it. Yeah, if you look at the very bottom, it flips from 50 to pounds when you tilt it in the light. And if you look at the window just above that has that microchip foil over it, again, checking that foil feature and the Queen's head just next to it, looking at those features will really help you to identify whether you've got a genuine note.
Well, do you know what, Sarah? I've been told I'm on strict instructions that this needs to come back to you very, very soon. So I'm going to pop it in my pocket for safekeeping just for now and say thank you very much for joining us, Sarah John. Great to see you this morning.
Thank you very much.